where are you seeing AI applied within your businesses today? Not just future facing, we can get to that later, but where have you seen some of those tangible benefits and had that help accelerate various aspects of your work?
Maybe I can offer up a little bit of a concrete example, just by starting by saying AI, and I agree, it's actually machine learning and pattern recognition that would be better terms, can be applied to all of these many different spaces. So there's all the spaces where you have humans that can already do it today, but you can do it faster, cheaper, maybe even better. That's less interesting to me. The more interesting things is like when you start having pattern recognition engines that can start doing things that humans can't do today because we're limited by brain power or level of knowledge we can comprehend at the same time. So a very concrete example of how we use that kind of machine learning is some of these algorithms you might have heard of, like AlphaFold that was given the Nobel Prize in chemistry a couple of years ago. So this ability to sit down and say, on a DNA level, if you make a change there, what is the enzymes? That is how biochemistry is done, biochemistry that we, for example, can use for small molecule discovery and development. How is that interaction of changing the genetic code up to the enzyme that makes the chemical reactions, and typically start with some feedstock, breaks down enzymes are the ones that plucks out the right building blocks of the feedstock, and the built up enzymes are the ones that puts them back together up to these molecules of interest. So what we can do is we can basically, with these new types of computational powers, we can, for example, brute force evolution. That means out in nature, you have one DNA change that maybe leads to an advantage that with generations of performance will become the prevalent trait in whatever bacteria, tree, or human that we are talking about. So these one change, one generation, if there's a benefit that competes better, that's how evolution works. And that's why it takes millions and billions of years for things to really develop. What we can do now with these technologies is we can sit down and say, okay, we want to build a small molecule that could be a very interesting drug, but chemically, we haven't been able to mass manufacture these before. Can we look at that and then reverse calculate what would the enzyme pathway, as it's called, but basically production line look like to get what are the things we have to break down into the building blocks and how do we put them together to this specific new small molecule. And then we can take each of those enzymes that are doing those steps, and then we can basically, well, that's why we call it exoscience. So instead of enzyme as inside of a cell, enzyme means inside reaction. We do these things outside of the cell. So we do one step at a time. So we're starting to have programmatic level control over chemical reactions that allows us to build new generation of small molecules. And this is something that was unthinkable just 3 years ago. And this is the kind of, just to show you kind of like the data sets we're talking about, we will sit down and say, okay, this enzyme has this gene coding for it. Let's say it's 1,000 base pairs. What if we play around with changing one base pair at a time and predict if it will make a positive impact? And then we run that computational power and try to find out what are the best mutations to incorporate. And in old days, that is like 3 years ago, people would say like, yeah, that's good because then you have all of this predicted thing, but how do we know if it's real? So what we have had to invent to be able to do these things is a scientific breakthrough of taking DNA and translating it into enzymes, basically by using enzymes themselves to do that translation. So we don't put DNA into cells anymore to express enzymes. We run that as an artificial process. And that allows us to do things in hours and days that before took months and years to do. And that means by having that speed up in, we do the prediction, we see if it works in reality, we feed that back in what is called reinforcement training loops to tell the algorithm, yes, you were right about this one, you were wrong about this other one. That way we can basically brute force evolution by learning super quick between reality and this AI prediction. And with that, we're making enzymes that was unthinkable before.